And through digitalizations, there are so many options for the youth to find decent jobs in the region if we work on this in a joint effort. But there is an area that is often overlooked. Climate change already poses a stress on existing industries. Some of the industries are very water intensive, for example. Climate change poses really a significant impact on these industries, so we also need to support these industries to reduce the water consumption through energy efficiency measures, through water efficiency measures, to reduce, to make them more resilient towards climate change impacts. Another aspect is that most of the countries are very highly import-dependent countries, and I mentioned before that working along to strengthen the local value chains, local beneficiation, create jobs in the region is a high priority also for our energy interventions. And then, last but not least, and very important, are the affordability constraints. There's still a strong belief that more energy-efficient products, for example, are more expensive. So we have to make sure that we do away with these beliefs and create markets for affordable products of high quality and energy efficiency. There we are again. So here in summary is basically our interventions area on energy before I show you some of the examples of projects in the region. So we work a lot on projects that increase energy access, particularly for productive use in the agricultural sector, but any type of productive use. It's for income generation, and if you have customers, then you also create jobs, and these projects are also economically viable. Stimulating low-carbon industrialization, localization of value chains, I mentioned, local enterprise development for climate and energy technology innovation, and investment facilitation. It is very critical, and we deeply believe that the solutions are usually in your own country. And there's so many local innovators that have good ideas, that have small businesses, but they need the small support for market readiness and to access financing. And this is a big area that we are working on through our Clean Tech Innovation Program. Some of you might have come across it in your country. Climate adaptation, I mentioned before, and clean energy technology transfer and deployment support. I think this goes without saying. We need the technologies available in the region, so creating these partnerships with the ambition for everyone to get a fair share of the deal, I think is the ambition throughout our projects. So I will now show you in a few minutes just some of the flagship projects that we already have in the region, so you have a more practical view of how these projects look like. We have a programmatic approach to improve energy access for productive use, where we really work on the policy and the business development. We do certification and skills development for renewable energy experts, for example, and also strengthening the local value chains. A project on this, we have two projects that are currently in the region under development. One is a project we are currently developing in Zambia with the Zambian partners. It's to develop, it's promoting renewable energy-based mini-grids for productive use in rural areas of Zambia. And it's a large-scale program which is under development. We believe this is going to have quite a significant impact. A project which is just closing right now is one in Mozambique, towards sustainable energy for all, where we basically worked on the policy and regulatory environment to promote integrated renewable energy systems in rural areas, but also set up a financing mechanism for local businesses that want to implement renewable energy projects. This is what we call the decarbonization accelerator. So we are working quite strongly on energy efficiency in industries, obviously, but we also see a lot of potential for what we call embedded generation, so for industries to produce their own renewable energy at industrial level on site. And we are even going a step further to work with quite a number of industries to sell then the surplus electricity either to nearby communities or back to the grid. So these are some of the projects that are usually quite integrated: optimization of energy consumption and investing in renewable energy generation. And an area which is strongly evolving, and also we're discussing in Zimbabwe, for example, is the area to work on the deep decarbonization of heavy industries that are really the large emitters. For example, we are developing a steel decarbonization project in South Africa. In Zimbabwe, in Zambia, we are discussing decarbonization of heavy industries, and it looks quite good that some funding will be made available for this. This is probably one of the flagship projects that ran over 10 years in South Africa, where we have worked with over 450 large and small industrial companies and assisted them to introduce energy management systems to really cut down on emissions, to cut down on costs, and cut down on energy consumption. And the project in South Africa set the foundation to roll this out in more than 30 countries by now. And the newest additions are going to be a project in Kenya, and one in Zimbabwe and one in Zambia. I already mentioned this one. Working directly with industries is one aspect, but I also wanted to mention, because it's so relevant for most of the countries here, are industrial parks or agro-parks. Any type of concentrated industrial activity that has a concentrated energy need has a very high potential to optimize energy consumption and to really generate their own electricity through renewable energy sources. And we are working on such a project in South Africa with a number of pilot parks that you see, and we are also discussing it with other countries now to roll it out. We call it positive energy industrial parks. See it as a new business model: generate electricity and sell the surplus to the nearby communities or into the grid. And the last project that I would like to mention before I close down, or two projects. One is a regional project where all of you are participating. It's the energy efficient lighting and appliances in East and Southern Africa project. It's running since 5 years. And all of these countries are currently participating. We are now expanding to the ECOWAS and to the ECAS region. And this project has developed minimum energy performance standards for energy efficient lighting, for energy efficient cooling appliances such as air conditioners, refrigerators, with the overall goal to do away with all these low quality and inefficient products that are coming into the market, consuming a lot of energy and cost a lot of money for people who don't have it. So this is, I would say, really a flagship project where we see a lot of participation from the countries. We also do private sector support here and capacity building. So quite a number of companies have engaged in the project and have benefited from it and now deliver products and services in the area of energy efficiency in this region. Come and join us tomorrow. We have a dedicated session at the SADC Industrialization Week, particularly on this project. I talked to all of this, and this is my last slide, which is our newest program. But I believe that many of your countries will sooner or later hear from it. This is really about strengthening clean tech value chains in Africa to accelerate the energy transition. It's what we call the Clever Africa program. And this is about strengthening local manufacturing in the countries. We are working on it together with the African Union as a continental wide program. It was really requested at the highest political level by all the ministers of transport and infrastructure and energy for the African Union and UNIDO to develop this program on manufacturing in Africa with the overall goal to have Africa as a manufacturing hub for clean energy technologies, having some champion countries that are moving it forward. And we are already discussing with quite a number of them. But you will all have this presentation, so there is more slides than what I'm talking to. So it's focusing on manufacturing, on quality assurance of the products, because a lot is manufactured, but sometimes, or often actually, the products are not going through a quality assurance mechanism that they have access then to international markets, for example. So this is a very important aspect, obviously to secure the supply in the region, but also enable these products to be exported to neighboring countries and to take advantage of the Africa Free Trade Agreement to strengthen inter-African trade and to create demand for your own manufactured products. So this is our new project that we are currently sourcing funding for and which we will be rolling out then in the different regions. So with this, I'll stop and say thank you very much.
Thank you. Karine, I know that you would have loved to continue. So thank you very much once again. And to continue, because we wanted to break the monotony and maybe go to talk about digitalization. But I think for the sake of continuity, we would like to call upon Mr. Nyoka, who will do a presentation on industrial energy efficiency. Over to you.
Thank you. Speaking about striking while the iron is hot, I'm going to take this opportunity to follow on Karine's presentation. I guess that's what good managers are for. They make your job easier because she covered some of my slides here. But I'm going to just go a bit in more detail on what we are doing in South Africa as UNIDO to support the industry in terms of transitioning to a low emissions industry. All right. All right. Okay, so my presentation will basically be covering the lessons learned from implementing the programs and projects, looking at industrial energy efficiency and sustainable energy for industrial spaces in South Africa. We say industrial spaces because we want to be inclusive. We have industrial parks, we've got industrial development zones, we've got special economic zones, we've got industrial areas. So we're working with all of those spaces on basically energy efficiency and sustainable energy investments. So my project, my presentation, would be covering the following. I won't go into what UNIDO does. I think it has been covered in detail by previous presentations. But I'll go into the background, UNIDO's programmatic approach to accelerate industrial energy efficiency in South Africa, and look at the UNIDO IE project in detail that has been covered briefly by Karine. And then look at two projects that UNIDO is implementing on sustainable energy investments in South Africa, and one that is under development. Okay, this is actually my favorite slide. I think I've had this slide in every presentation that I've made since I joined UNIDO. But basically, it is to just contextualize the situation that South Africa is faced in terms of its energy sector. And I believe it's not unique to South Africa. Every other country is probably experiencing the same issues. So the South African energy sector is faced with three problems. We call it the triple crisis. One is an energy supply crisis. Since 2006, I'm sure you've heard of the term load shedding and the rolling blackouts that we've been experiencing as a country since the year 2006. It's something that we're still grappling with. Of course, it has eased in this year that we're in right now, but in the previous, it has been very aggressive. And then the next one is the climate crisis, the need to transition. As you are aware that most of our electricity is coming from coal-based generation, from our utility, ESCOM, which is also supplied some of the countries in the SADC region. And then there's an economic crisis. Over the years, historically, electricity in South Africa has been cheap. But over the years, we've seen an increase in electricity prices up to the amount of 450% since 2006. So as you'd imagine, if you're an industrial enterprise operating within South Africa, this has caused a paradigm shift. Because not only are you expected to be competitive, but you also need to struggle with these challenges, looking at the reliability of energy supply, the increasing electricity costs. And then on top of that, we also need to transition your processes because of the climate crisis that you're trying to cap. So we then looked at implementing some of the measures that would actually enable to support the industry in responding to the challenges. I think I might have skipped all of them. Okay.
So we're
This is
this one?
I am here. I think this is the slide that I'm on. So we then looked at industrial energy efficiency as a project. This is a project that was basically conceptualized to respond to the load shedding that we were experiencing in the country and the increasing electricity prices that were faced by the industry. At a high level, the project was conceptualized, number one, to improve industrial energy efficiency in South Africa. Why energy efficiency in industry? In South Africa, the industry consumes between 40 and 60% of the energy, depending on the sectors that you'd want to categorize into that, looking at mining, manufacturing, and other sectors. 50 to 60 goes to the industrial sector. So it became important to look at, imagine if you could improve the energy efficiency, the pressure that you would release from the grid and make resources available to provide electricity to other areas that are in need of electricity, to promote access, basically. So we looked at this project in which we were supporting the mainstreaming, basically, of energy management systems, energy system optimization in the industrial sector. And in this, we were implementing the project with other stakeholders. The Department of Energy in South Africa was involved. The National Cleaner Production Center of South Africa and SANED were also very instrumental partners in the implementation of the project. So in the approach that we took in implementing this project, we looked at creating this enabling ecosystem for basically the adoption of the energy management systems and energy system optimization in the industrial sector, looking at policy advocacy, that is supporting and strengthening frameworks that would support basically the collection of data from industry and the implementation of energy management standards. Then we looked at technical assistance and capacity building. I think skills was stressed very much as an important aspect to this. That is training and capacity building of everyone involved within the industry, be it technical people that are involved in industrial operations, also policymakers. We then looked at demonstrating some of the projects here, because everyone, before they buy a car, they would prefer kicking the tires before they get into any kind of a deal. So we looked at demonstrating some of the projects here, looking at industrial energy efficiency and their benefits based on your GHG emission reduction and the cost savings that result from implementing some of these measures. And then financing is a big aspect that needs to be looked into here. And we looked at developing a pipeline of projects and provide technical assistance to actually engage with the financiers and financial institutions. And lastly, knowledge management and awareness raising is a big component of energy efficiency in general. And then this actually is a very important part of it, because narratives that are told on how energy efficiency relates to skills, how it relates to just energy transition, how it relates to job creation. These are the stories that we were telling through this project, looking at the savings that were made, looking at the people that were supported in terms of skills development, looking at the companies that were supported as well. So here I just wanted to show the highlights and the impact of the project. It's a project that lasted over 10 years in its implementation. In the second and the first and the second phase, which were funded by the governments of the UK. The Global Environment Facility was also the sole funder of the second phase. In terms of impact, the project managed to save 6.5 terawatt hours of electricity, mitigated 6.4 megatons of carbon dioxide, and resulting cumulative savings that resulted from the implementation of the initiatives were sitting at 5.3 billion. That was back in the year 2020, which is about, if I were to convert that into dollars, I think about $220 million US. And then in terms of training, when the project started in its first year of implementation, NCPC, who was implementing some of the initiatives here, had about 15 experts that were supporting industry. By the time the project ended, they were sitting at 314 experts in different fields, looking at steam, looking at fans, motor system optimization, energy management systems. These professionals have now at the disposal of the South African community and the world in terms of implementing energy efficiency measures. And an indirect outcome of this was that some of these people that came out as experts have actually started their own energy service companies that are now employing people, speaking to that job creation aspect. So in total, professionals that are trained were 6,000 and over 6,000. These are looking at technical people, policymakers, and experts that are trained. Issue I spoke to right now, 314 as an output. Local trainers trained 199. And then training courses that have been developed have been 13, looking at different topics. I spoke of motor system optimization. I spoke of fan system optimization and steam and other management courses. So as was indicated earlier on, that the project then was replicated in other countries. Nigeria is one of those countries that are currently implementing a similar program. So that's the industrial energy efficiency, which provided for a foundation for energy optimization within the industrial spaces. And then we started thinking, for wider impact, we need to look at now more of a broader approach. That's where the conversation around industrial spaces came into. And then we then looked at what basically the challenges and opportunities that exist that we could basically take advantage of. So in terms of the barriers that we saw when we are approaching industrial spaces from the angle of sustainable energy investments, we realized that there's insufficient integration and coordination of sustainable energy strategies, policies, and regulation for industrial spaces. So I want you to imagine an industrial space. An industrial space, it has a demarcated area that is supplied either from a utility in terms of electricity or from a local municipality. So we realized that the municipality, in most cases, would be responsible for maintaining the grid within the industrial space. And for that to happen, there needs to be a coordinated planning approach between the industrial management entity and the local municipality, because wherever there's a need for instance, embedded generation investments, if there's an issue around the grid that needs to be improved, it's not the management entity that does that, it's the municipality that does that. So these two parties need to talk when it comes to energy planning within that demarcated area. So we're looking into this as a barrier. And then the second barrier was that industrial spaces in general do not consider sustainable energy or integrated solutions due to evidence-based approaches. That is technology integration at a park management level. For instance, if you go to a park and say you want to install a solar PV system, without evidence that it has worked, it's very difficult to convince. Number one, there's a cost issue involved. The integration of the technology also means that you need to change the way in which you operate your industrial processes, which could also mean that there's an impact on your production. So you need to demonstrate those cases from a cost point of view in terms of how much money you use to develop the projects and the impacts of it on your normal industrial processes, looking at business as usual. So that is the case that we wanted to look at here. And lack of financial and investment environment was another big issue that we have identified. And then in another project, we then looked at the potential to have these industrial spaces as energy generation entities that can sell electricity to the grid or to the tenant companies and surrounding communities. In that approach, we discovered that currently in South Africa, there's limitations of how this can be done by industrial space, looking from a policy and regulatory point of view. And also the missing pipeline of projects that can actually do this, and business models that have been implemented to showcase this potential. So in terms of opportunities, based on the barriers that we discovered, we looked at there's a massive potential, number one, in GHG reduction by improving existing technologies, that is integrating energy efficiency, bringing in renewables, and also there's a massive potential for industrial spaces in general to play a bigger role, an even bigger role in energy security that is within the areas which they are managing. And also in terms of increasing the overall generation capacity, that is speaking to energy security matter that I just spoke of right now. And also the last one that I want to touch on was industrial spaces can be aggregators of the load within their present, meaning that they can even run a load curtailment scheme if need be, especially in a changing electricity distribution industry, such as in South Africa. I know I can share more about that once I discuss the projects and what I mean. So we then looked at these two projects that I'm going to quickly run through.
I think very quickly, Mr.
Yeah.
Nyoka.
I can talk all day about this.
They are energy experts, so they are full of energy, yeah?
There are these two projects in which we are trying to tackle some of the barriers to realize opportunities that we've identified there. One is looking at sustainable energy systems for industrial development. This project basically is looking at the planning side of things, right? Looking at supporting these industrial spaces with development of energy strategies that have been developed in collaboration with the municipalities. And that process will start with energy mapping to inform the energy strategies. And then it will look at creating this coordination mechanism between park management entities and municipalities. That's the coordination part of it. And then we would look at funding feasibility studies and providing technical assistance for projects that will be implemented within these industrial spaces. Here we're looking at both renewable supply side and demand side interventions. And then based on the implementation of this project, we then look at scaling up strategy, basically what lessons we have learned from the project and how they would look comparable to the population of industrial spaces that we have in South Africa. It's a project that is currently under implementation. And the last one that I want to talk to is this particular project. This project's objective is to look at the potential of industrial spaces to operate as energy producers that can sell electricity to their companies that are located within the zones, sell some to the grid and to neighboring communities. It's funded by the government of Flanders. There's a lot of documents that will come out of this. For instance, power purchase agreements between the park management entities and the tenants, cost-efficient procurement guidelines, what an energy guideline for a low-carbon industrial space looks like. One of the things that we're going to look at here. And then we're going to look at demonstrating now some of these sustainable business models in which a park is in the middle of selling. Basically, in the structure, they are responsible for selling electricity as an extra generation revenue generation scheme. So that's what we'll be testing out here. And all of these lessons from the previous project and this project will be used now to inform that scale-up strategy in which we would look at rolling out similar interventions in other industrial spaces. Just as a disclaimer, there's over 450 industrial spaces in South Africa that could benefit from this. And we try to be as inclusive as possible in terms of choosing which industrial spaces we're working with, just to get a better representation in terms of what is possible in others. And lastly, I think it is always important when we look at renewable energy and energy efficiency, we view them as two sides of the same coin in terms of supplying clean energy that is used efficiently. I think in that approach, we stand to make very good inroads in terms of reducing our emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was refreshing. I think the details about, what UNIDO is doing, at country level, delving into the details. I think that was, useful. Now we move on to the next presenter, my colleague Firas. He will do a presentation on digitalization and AI and what we are doing as UNIDO.
Thank you. I need to bring this a bit to the front to see the. Yes. So this is left and right.
Okay, good.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, good afternoon. It's an honor to be here again. It's my second time in Harare. So my name is Firas Ghanem, and I work in the Digital Transformation and Artificial Intelligence Department. And I'll be presenting a few slides on our approach, our tools, and how we go about this through a couple of examples from our projects. I will not go through this again. I'm sure our colleagues has already presented UNIDO's mandate and the visions and all that, but it's very important to mention that the two elements of inclusiveness and sustainability is at the heart of what we are going to do in terms of digital transformation. And that's why when we presented in UNIDO our vision on digital transformation, the motto was to have a digital, gender-responsive, sustainable transformation. There are three outputs mainly that we saw that it's going to lead us to our goal, which is the ninth. Did you move? Yes, because I'm moving too, now I have to, yes, sorry. So there are these three outputs basically we saw that are going to lead the path towards the ninth SDG, and that is, first of all, having a smart production for advanced climate action, and here we'll see a lot of similarities in the messages that has been presented by the colleagues because we work with them, again, to achieve this strategy. There is the element of innovation, digital transformation, harnessed for economic development, which is at the core always. And of course, not to forget about the livelihoods being improved through the use of digital and AI-based technologies. And this is very important because the human element is always at the center. It's centric to all the approaches and all the projects that we develop and we try to implement, because the message here is that these new technologies, AI, bots, are not here to replace employees and workers, but it's to complement, it's to strengthen, it's to bridge the gap in skills that exist over there. So, to achieve this, I'm here, okay, good. We have more or less 6 modules. So we talk about road mapping and policy advice in terms of preparing strategic plans for digital transformation to assist the country to adopt and to adapt to the new technologies. Global partnerships that are always important, because without this, the trend setters globally for these technologies, without having some kind of partnership with them, it's always, you risk being behind and not being able to know what is happening now, so this is always important. Global forums and awareness raising. And then, of course, the application of new technologies, and I will show a couple of examples of how these new technologies is implemented on enterprise level to show advances or enhancement in competitiveness, in quality, and what have you. Skills development, I think my colleagues has already mentioned extensively about the type of skill development need. Here we focus on the digital transformation related skills. And of course, innovation and smart production. So setting up the production system without the enterprises to really be able to enhance the production and the quality. So in general, what we try to do is how do we build the gap from here to digital transformation within a country or within a region, you know. So there are these 6 elements. First of all, there is the mapping of the ecosystem that we do for the digital transformation. The second one is having a smart factory lab or an entity where you can have a place where you can test and innovate and see how these new technologies are working. Skills, industrial support institutions, because they're very important. This is the environment for the enterprises and that is providing all the services. And we always have a pilot with enterprises. So in order to ensure and to see how this system, how this ecosystem is working with each other, we always go for a pilot with a number of enterprises. There is selection criteria to get them. You put them and you see how this works. Basically, this is to demonstrate how the ecosystem is working. And finally, investment promotion, technology transfer, and partnership. It's also very important because when we talk about technologies, we need to have investors coming from outside because these are the ones who are providing technologies and advancement. You know, partnerships are important, technology transfer, etc. So to go into a bit of detail into this. So what do we do in the mapping of the ecosystem? So there is an identification of the main stakeholders and the collaboration among them. That is very important because usually that is the main missing element, is the collaboration between the different stakeholders. We assess the resources, human, financial, natural one, because that's all, that's the basis. Institutional, so the policy, regulatory, the norms, the standards, the culture, and the governance. Innovation, entrepreneurship, markets, networks, partnership, collaboration, and we come up with a strategic roadmap and plans on how to advance from where we are toward closer to the adoption of the 4IR technologies and all. The Smart Factory Laboratory, it's a place, it's an entity that we establish or we strengthen existing institutions in the country towards that for the aim of, this is a test bed and for proofing of concept test. Here we also look at the product and process innovation and process optimization. It's also a place for training because they have all the technologies, they have all the equipment, so that's a good place to get the people from the theoretical training into the practical training to see how the systems work, how is the interoperability between different technologies, how to test a new production line, or even how to go, we go now to the standards later on, how to see like you need to set a standard, for a certain process. It's also like a place for incubating and accelerating ecosystem collaboration. It's a platform for academy, industry, to come together as well, because you have a lot of university students that would want to come and try this concept, but also you bring from the industry. And then when you link them together and they provide solutions, from the students of engineering or computer or sciences, whatever, when they provide solutions to the industry, that's that's the heart of it, that's where it works. And finally, of course, it's a place for awareness raising and driving a cultural shift, so you have publications, events, and conferences, to make sure that this is all over spread and disseminated. Again, I go to skills now. So skills, training centers, university, vocational training. Again, with our colleagues, I will also mention a project that we are doing in Tunisia and Cote d'Ivoire. So there is the incorporation of dedicated curricula on artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, robotics, 3D manufacturing, in educational programs, university, vocational training, so programs that are created to suit the demand and to compensate for the lack of skills and the needs for the industry. Platforms to offer trainings and skill development, because not all skills are accessible. Some you need to create platforms, some need to be done remotely. So all that is part of the approach. And then, of course, certification and accreditation of digital and 4IR-related skills. You need to make sure that these skills are maintained and the people who are doing it know what they're talking about. So certification is very important here. For the industry support institutions like technology centers, testing centers, standards, R&D, what we do is that we assess and diagnose these services. Then, based on that, we look at the missing skills and missing capacity building needs for the staff, and we try to build it. You develop the resources, their internal house, the infrastructural upgrading. They need equipment, they need new tools to go ahead with that. Enhancing and expanding the type of services in accordance with the need of the enterprises. So again, they have number of services, but maybe they're not suited to the needs of the enterprises, or something is missing, or something is inadequate. So this is something we look at, and we try to bring it up to the level that is needed. Of course, collaboration, partnership, and global networking. It's always important to put these institutions and these centers with other centers globally or regionally, so they can benefit from each other experiences. And again, a platform for knowledge sharing and networking. So they are all sharing one platform. They can ease the access and ease the exchanges and the cooperation between these different institutions. Pilot with the enterprises, yes. So when it comes to piloting with enterprises, this is coming from a long-standing project, pilot project or flagship project that UNIDO has, industrial upgrading and modernization. That has been done in different regions in Africa, especially in the UEMOA and the Central Africa. And piloting has always been at the heart of the different initiatives, because that's where you see the different interventions, coming all together and taking shape and making sense, Again, with the limited budget constraints that usually this project have, you can always go with a selected number of enterprises, depending on the budget, to go inside these enterprises, diagnose and check the readiness assessment, to conduct a readiness assessment for these enterprises, how ready they are to adopt and how to use these new technologies. And based on that, we prepare an upgrading plan. And then providing capacity building to the management employees to ensure that the skills are developed in the right manner. And then we implement the new concept and processes and methods in the target enterprises. And then comes the technological solutions, hardware and software, where we can add more. And then the process optimization and the collaboration within the ecosystem. This is very important, because if we're upgrading institutions that are providing services, we need to link it to these enterprises. Otherwise, what's the point of doing everything in a separate manner? So this has to come together, because this will validate the approach. And of course, eventually the monitoring and continuous improvement. That is very important, because technologies are developing every day, value chains are changing, the whole landscape is changing every day, so there is always a need to monitor to see how you're improving and to check oneself against others, on the local, regional, or the international market. For the investment promotion part, of course, there is the regulatory framework and incentives aimed at attracting investment in digital transformation. So there is a need to look at these rules and regulations that facilitate attracting investor. Supporting infrastructure responsible for promoting investment. So they are like whatever infrastructures that are in the country, local and internationally, we try to support it so it can perform in a better way. Participating in investment forums, conferences, exhibitions. It's important also to be aware of the latest technology, of what is happening, and also it's a place to bring together, different investors or different technology providers and enterprises. And finally, industry alliances between local businesses, foreign investors, technology providers, and academic institutions to promote collaboration and innovation. And I will probably give a couple of examples toward the end of my presentation here. So we have two flagship projects, So as I mentioned, we have a project that we are also implementing with collaboration with our colleagues from Skills, especially Output 3. But in general, this project is funded by the German, how do you say it? Bundeszusammenarbeit. So BMZ. So it's the German Cooperation Ministry, German Technical Cooperation Ministry. And it's aimed at basically supporting Tunisia and Cote d'Ivoire to increase youth employment, salaries, and labor conditions through shaping and consolidating the digital economy ecosystem. And as I mentioned, the main elements are the same. So we looked at the ecosystem, which shows the priority value chains for them. In their case, there was the agro-food, and there was also the pharmaceuticals. We established a smart factory. There was already the structure for that, but they needed additional equipment to run the test, to fine-tune it towards the selected value chains. There has been a development of a dedicated training capacity on 4IR knowledge, and this is the part that we are doing with our colleagues here, where we managed within the university to establish a number of training modules, on 3D printing, on robotics, and then establishing and strengthening, the 4IR institutions within the country. So now we are in the stage of providing technical assistance to these technical centers. We're piloting with 112 enterprises between Tunisia and Cote d'Ivoire. We have made the diagnosis, and now we're going into the stage where we provide them with the technical capacity building and some equipment. And finally, investment promotion and network digital transformation facilitation. And we have managed to make them part of a number of conferences and big exposés. For example, recently they went to Hanover Messe, I think that was earlier this year. I will not go into the detail of this one. It's very similar, but it's also for Morocco. Yes, this is as I mentioned before, we have, within our division, we have been working in the last couple of years to establish such alliances, because we realize that with these alliances, with different, especially that are aiming to make a kind of connection or bring different technology providers and leaders in the field of AI and digital transformation, is very important for our member states. So we have two. One is the first one is the UNIDO Global Alliance on Artificial Intelligence for industry and manufacturing, and it's mainly it has a number of activities. So it has a number of working sectoral groups, for each sector basically. Provides capacity building trainings, regional technical workshops, events and conferences, and policy briefs. I think a more interesting one, a more relevant one would be ISMA. And ISMA also has been launched in October 23, basically, which is an alliance for Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing in Africa. It starts with a small core group where we have a number of members, some technology providers, we have some members from academia and from the industry. And the aim is, as we say, the objective is to unlock the future of Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing in Africa, focusing on raising awareness and fostering collaboration. And the impact is to promote Africa's integration, generate inclusive and sustainable development, of course, job creation, and empower people to break the digital divide. All this I can share with you the presentation. I don't want to bore you, read from the thing. But maybe the last slide is also on, no, sorry. It jumped? Very fast. I didn't even touch it. You did it. Yes. So we have 6 axes in ISMA, basically. We are focusing on industry application, digital technology. It's gone. I didn't touch it. Look. Yes. So industry application, digital technologies, education and training, scientific research, standardization, and policies and brief. I just want to mention that we have recently, UNIDO and ISMA, we've participated in the International Smart Factory Summit that took place in Switzerland. So we made the first publication, because I mentioned earlier the Smart Factory. And one of the things that we were working on, basically, and we have published it, I will share with you later on probably the presentation through the colleagues, and the link to the publication. We have a guidelines on the establishment of a Smart Factory Lab. There we have all the different approaches and different details, how it can be established. And yes, this was done with UNIDO in collaboration with the Swiss CXO Forum. And it was June last year, and this is a photo of all of us. I think this is all. These are only probably some of QR codes for UNIDO Knowledge Hub and AIM, and also ISMA, which also I encourage you to visit and to join. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Firas, for bringing us up to date with digitalization and modern technologies. Now I'll call upon our colleague Enewi to make a presentation on eco and agro-industrial parks. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Matilda. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Enyo Abara. I'm a project manager at UNIDO. I will be sharing UNIDO's experience in the implementation of agro-food parks, basically mainly agro-food parks, so I will not go deep into the eco-industrial park aspect. In this presentation, I will focus on the following 5 key areas. Probably I will skip the first slide since a lot has been said about UNIDO and its mandate. Just to start with, UNIDO actually has been supporting member states in the development of industrial park and agro-industrial, especially agro-industrial park since the 1980s. So it's more than 40 years providing this support. For example, in the early 80s, when China was piloting the special economic zone, UNIDO was among the UN agencies that facilitated the first generation SEZs in China. So since then, we have diversified our portfolios and also global reach in terms of supporting industrial park and also agro-industrial park. And currently, as you can see on the slide, we are supporting 16 countries, some of them in this region, majority of them in African continent. Yeah, for example, when we hear the word industrial park, there are confusing terminologies. There was a study that came out recently where 82 different terminologies are used to refer to this industrial park. But the essence is the same, but with a bit of difference, because the fundamental idea of an industrial park is having a kind of industrial location, a delineated area where different companies settled and share infrastructure and utilities to achieve economies of scale. So this is the basic essence of an industrial park. But at UNIDO, we prefer to use the term industrial park. This is one of our identity. We often use with the prefix, for example, eco-industrial park, agro-industrial park, agro-food park, and so on. And we have different kind of guidelines developed for these different varieties of industrial park. Just looking at our portfolios, I have categorized them for simplicity into 4 areas, where the first part deals with the agro part, the food park and agro processing, where we support new agro-industrial park in developing countries. We also have the Eco-Industrial Park Initiative, the Global Eco-Industrial Park Initiative, where the main focus is more achieving transition from traditional industrial park to more sustainable industrial park. This is more a brownfield activity. It's more tenant-level intervention in terms of, for example, achieving energy efficiency in terms of creating linkage between companies within the park. We also have a science technology park and also investment facilitation in the context of SEZs, special economic zone. Now, moving to the specifics of agro-industrial park, and as you can see, this is one of our guidelines where we launched last year together with our partner institution, including the African Development Bank, to have a kind of consolidated understanding of what an agro-food park is. So we defined the agro-food park as a kind of agribusiness corridor, the area development initiative, comprising different value chain actors and connecting these value chain actors. These are companies, smallholder farmers, and also other actors with a world-class infrastructure to achieve more economies of scale, as well as also to achieve a market-driven agricultural system with ultimate goal, of course, achieving a rural transformation. So when we say agro-food park, integrated agro-industrial park, it's a little bit different from traditional industrial park. In the traditional industrial park, we only talk about companies concentrated in a specific area and produce final product and so on. But in the case of integrated agro-food park, we are talking about actually 3 components which function as a system. This is our model. The first part is the agro-processing hub. This is similar to the traditional industrial park where we have companies producing final product, packaging, distribution, and so on. So we have all this shared infrastructure and so on. This is where we produce the final product. This is a typical master plan from one of the agro-processing hub. Linked to this, we have several rural transformation centers. We call them rural transformation centers. These are a kind of a mini version of park developed or closer to the farm, the farming community. So the objective is to create strong linkage between the farmers and the processing companies. So they serve as a center, a hub for providing different extension services, for example, in terms of facilitating credit, in terms of providing, for example, primary health service, and so on, agri-clinic, and so on. So the typical example we have, for example, in Ethiopia, we have one agro-processing hub supported by 6 rural transformation centers, which are developed within 100 to 150 kilometer radius. So they are located in a distance area and contributing to the processing. And the third one is more kind of additional existing infrastructure where we call the collection center, because agricultural system in many African countries is smallholder driven, and we have a large smallholder farmers scattered in large areas. So aggregation is always a challenge. So this is like a village level aggregation of product, then this aggregated product either go to RTC or to the market or for processing to the hub. So all these 3 give us a kind of a systemic interconnected illustration where the hub is at the center supported by RTCs and so on. So one thing I want to pass to you is that when we say agro-food park, we are talking about the catchment area. It's not just the processing hub, the catchment area. So it's area development approach. So the next question is, well, now we know what an agro-food park is, what an integrated agro-industrial park is, then why do we develop agro-food parks? So these are obvious issues that we face in African countries, for example, issues with raw material supply for processing companies. When you go to processing companies, most of them operate below their installed capacity. This could be one of the issues. Infrastructure issue, for example, issues of energy. There is also issues of water and so on. Input supplies, the challenge, and all this adding up increases the initial investment cost for private sector to come in. So the operational cost is high, the initial investment cost is also high. So it plays a kind of prohibitive role in terms of attracting investment. So the next question would be, can an agro-industrial park unlock these challenges? The answer is yes, but if it is implemented in a proper context, supported by a proper policy environment. Because we have seen successful industrial parks, successful agro-food park, but we have seen also a failure in some of the park. So So the objective, the basic objective, some of the basic objectives of the agro-food park is, one is attracting investment, but it doesn't end there, leveraging this investment to achieve a wider rural transformation. So linking farmers to the processing companies is one of the key areas, and also creating a kind of platform for industry and agriculture and the trade to interact. This linkage is missing in many of the countries. There are also other additional objectives. For example, looking at some of our ongoing agro-food park portfolios, as I mentioned in the introduction, we are supporting around 16 countries in different stages of agro-food park development. For example, if you see the orange color is the planned agro-food park. Planned means we have received a request from the government for supporting integrated agro-food park development, and UNIDO is analyzing the request and working with this requesting institution. Then the blue color is more the parks which are under development. For example, in some countries, we have conducted a comprehensive feasibility study, selected a site and location, established a steering committee, policy support, and so on. And also, the green one is where the park is operational. Currently, Ethiopia is one country where we supported 4 integrated agro-industrial parks, where 3 of them are currently operational. These are a big park with huge investment also from government side. So when it comes to our support as UNIDO, especially agribusiness division, we provide support, different support linked to agro-food parks, some linked to quality issues in terms of ensuring quality supply of raw material, food safety issues, and so on. So it's a diversified support. This we do also in cooperation with other departments and divisions of UNIDO. And also, what is most important is UNIDO is also part of these 2 big regional initiatives focusing on agro-food parks. The first one is the Alliance for Special Agro-Industrial Processing Zone, which was launched last year by a big financing institution in Africa, for example, African Development Bank, African Exim Bank, and so on. The objective is to provide a financing support, either in the form of loan or grant, to government and also private sector, and committed around $3 billion in this sector. These are relatively a new initiative, which is a potential to tap in. The second one is the Common African Agro Park Initiative, where UNIDO is also supporting technically. The objective is to build cross-border agro-industrial park in different regions of Africa. So coming to the mode of support, I mean, in most of the presentation, you have heard about different initiatives, and our mode of support, our major mode of support is technical cooperation. So through our different departments and also in collaboration with within other partners within UNIDO and also external partners. For example, in the case of industrial park, how can we start cooperating with UNIDO? For example, the way you do is, for example, request comes from member states. It could be Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Agriculture, requesting for technical support for establishment of integrated agro-industrial park. Then discussion starts, then the process starts. So there has to be official request from the government. Then it follows other aspects, other principles of technical cooperation. So the next slide is more about the technical aspect of how do we do the planning of industrial park. Because industrial park, it's a complex process that involves multiple actors and also money processes, then a proper planning determine the success and the failures of this industrial park. So at UNIDO, we follow a 6-step approach for successful implementation of agro-food park. The first step starts with the business case, demand analysis, and pre-feasibility studies. For example, when we receive requests from our member state, the next thing we do is ask, is there a demand for such developed land from the private sector or even from publicly owned enterprise in terms of investment? There has to be a demand. This is where we start engaging with the private sector in terms of understanding whether there is a demand or not. Then to have a clarity of vision and mission. What do we want to achieve with the agro-food park? Do we want to do a value addition or create job and so on? It's important to clearly stipulate this part at the early stage, because an agro-food park is a tool. So the tool is as good as you use it. So it's important. It does not solve all the problems. It only solves certain problems. For example, there are this decision-making graph. What are the hindrances in investment? Then if the challenge is geography of the country, resource availability is a challenge, then an industrial park may be not a solution. But if you have a problem of poor infrastructure, weak business climate, and adverse trade and investment regime and so on, then you can proceed that, okay, an agro park or industrial park can be part of a solution. So this has to be considered. So some of the key studies that we do at the early stage, for example, we conduct a pre-feasibility studies. What does the macroeconomic environment look like? Which sector and subsector we should focus? Because we have to see a sector with potential. And also we have to see, is there a supporting policy environment in terms of implementing this initiative? And also we go on in terms of identifying location. Okay, what is the potential strategic location for establishing this park? Because location determines the success and failure of industrial park. So one of the challenge, for example, we face in our implementation of agro-food park in our support is that the minister or an agency come with a specific location, then we want to build a park in this location. As UNIDO, for example, we have a list of criteria and a matrix and how to identify location in the site for industrial park. But sometimes it's politically driven and it's a challenge for the implementation of industrial park. And also it affects the success of park. We have seen parks build, tenants not there. We have seen park build, energy is not there. So this kind of thing. And also at the early stage, we have to think about the stakeholder mapping. Who are the key stakeholders? Whom should I involve early? For example, key ministries in terms of agriculture, industry, the financing, environment, energy, these are key. So when we establish a steering committee, it's key to involve these key stakeholders at the early stage. Yeah, so the second step is the feasibility step, where we conduct different kind of studies. For example, feasibility in terms of economic feasibility, the technical, operational, and scheduling aspect also. In this stage also, it's key to conduct environmental social impact assessment, because we have to see if the park is feasible from a sustainability point of view. This is important because when you go to African Development Bank or World Bank for funding of an industrial park, the first thing they ask you is there a social and environmental impact assessment conducted? So without that, it's extremely impossible for big infrastructure such as agro park to get funding. Then also at this stage we do detailed engineering design and review of this design. For example, you identified certain environmental challenges. Then when you do the design, you take into consideration these challenges and address some of the environmental challenges through design. So these are key in this step. The third step, which is very important, is the financing aspect. Where do we get the financing of agro-food park? So, for example, from experience of Ethiopia and other countries, multiple sources of financing has to be considered. Because, for example, I mentioned that the new initiative by the African Development Bank, which pledged $3 billion, is one of the opportunity to tap in. But we have to have a resource to tap into that. We have to have a resource to conduct the studies, feasibility studies, and environmental social impact assessment. So from experience, some of the studies are funded through grant. For example, UNIDO, together with the member state, mobilized resource for that. And some construction aspect and linkage aspect is funded through bank loan and national budget. Then the operation phase is usually co-financed, and also the PPP approaches some of the experience. So in terms of financing model, our thesis, for example, we follow more a scaling up approach. We utilize our small resources, then leverage additional resources, support our member state to mobilize additional resources. For example, these are some of the figures from Ethiopia, where the integrated agro-industrial park is funded through different financing institutions from different donors, including EU, FDB, the Korean Exim Bank, and so on. Some of the funding is a grant, and the majority of it is, of course, it's a loan. So what we do in terms of financing is to enable member states to access financing from different institutions, because UNIDO is not a funding agency. And the fourth step is on infrastructure development. Here, two things are important. Face-to-face development is very important, because in some countries you see, we want to build a park and we identified 5,000 hectares of land. Well, that is good news, but you may not need that area in the first phase. So divide based on the actual demand. First, develop certain aspects. If the tenant comes, keep on expanding, because this is a long process. And also, the fifth step is investment promotion. This is not like only in the fifth step. This is a cross-cutting phase where we do investment promotion throughout the process. In the initial stage, we do with the demand analysis. With the feasibility studies, we approach certain enterprises actually to get involved into development of the park itself and so on. So this is a long process. And of course, finally, the operation phase, ensuring the operation of the park, providing all the necessary support tenants, and also encouraging aftercare services. So just few remarks from lesson learned. We have seen that some of the parks are over-designed, a very big park, very little tenant, and also we have seen a strong political influence in terms of site selection, which can affect the entire process. There is also too many institutions are engaged. It's important to involve key institutions at the early stage, but some of them can be engaged along the process. So there has to be an institutional mechanism. For example, in the case of some of our operational industrial park, we have the task force, then we have the technical steering committee dealing with the technical aspect. And also there is some uncompetitive policies related to, for example, restricted access to domestic market. For example, you produce in a park, you are not allowed to sell within the country. So you have to export to other countries and so on. Also, there is limited provision of off-site infrastructure because, for example, we have heard about energy access and so on in the previous presentation. One of the purposes of building an industrial park is to provide companies with adequate utilities, including energy. But we see in many countries that a park is built, but energy is not there. And also limited linkage with the rest of the economy. A park is built, but raw material is supplied from abroad, processed, a little value addition, then send out. So it's a very weak linkage with the local economy in terms of linkage with the farmer, with SMEs, and so on. Yeah, I think this is the end of my presentation.
It was so long.
That was very long. So, yeah, this is my email address. You can also scan and get it, the email address and so on. We can engage, I think, one-to-one.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Thank you. So last but not least, we will hear a presentation on cluster development. There's a colleague that was supposed to be here, but we are lucky that she delegated someone to do a presentation for her. So Catherine, please.
Thank you very much, Matilda. Good evening, colleagues. My name is Catherine Mwangi. I am working in the division of SME competitiveness, quality, and job creation at UNIDO headquarters. I'll be presenting to you UNIDO's approach to cluster development. The outline of the presentation consists of UNIDO's cluster development approach, bringing you to an introduction of the cluster development approach, followed by principles for cluster development, and then we'll move on to a project experience. We picked one project, which is based in Ghana. It is part of the West African Competitiveness Program. I don't know how many have heard about this program, funded by the EU. And then we'll move on to lessons learned, and finally, the next steps. I'll try to rush in the presentation. I don't want to take so much of your time. I know time has really gone. UNIDO's cluster development approach. At UNIDO, we've been working in this area over the past years. If you can look at the map on the right-hand side, where it is indicated blue, that's where we have the projects focusing on cluster development. So we have projects in Africa, we have projects in Asia, we have projects also in South American countries. Cluster development is a very adaptable and flexible approach. In terms of adaptability, you can work in various value chains. It's very flexible. You don't have to work like in a particular value chain, like maybe, energy value chain, no, but you can work in quite diverse sectors. We can see that different countries, they have different needs, meaning that different strategies are going to be employed, and different priorities, because different countries, they have different priorities. So what we apply, for example, in Ghana is not what is going to be applied, for example, in Albania or Liberia, etc. A few of the advantages of cluster development is that we have seen that employing this approach, there is process upgrading and quality improvement, because the SMEs that we work with, they are able to improve their products. For example, if their products cannot meet particular standards, then if they are part of a cluster, then they can get their products to have enhanced quality, thereby gaining market access and also product development. We know that now we are talking very frequently about the AFCFTA, so market access is linked to that, and also innovation. So when the different SMEs participate in a cluster, they are able to access new forms of technology. My colleague Firas has mentioned about digitalization. So these are just a few advantages of employing this approach. So what is a cluster? So a cluster is a sectoral and geographical concentration of enterprises which produce a similar range of goods or services, and they face similar threats and opportunities. Because the enterprises, they are located in a particular geographical concentration, we see that they are faced with similar problems. For example, if it's access to finance, it's not only one enterprise that's going to be faced by that challenge, but it's the enterprises that are in that particular cluster. So a cluster is a collaborative environment where we see the SMEs and the MSMEs. We know that 90% of the businesses in Africa, they are actually MSMEs. From the informal sector and networks of SMEs, and they are at the center, and they do not only participate in this collaborative environment by themselves, they also collaborate with government institutions, academia, research institutions, NGOs, financial institutions, media, etc. So that collaborative aspect and that collaborative environment is what we see that it enhances the cluster ecosystem. So why are we interested in supporting cluster development? We've seen that clusters are promising environments for the development of linkages for competitiveness. We know that many enterprises in Africa, they are faced with hurdles of not being very competitive, therefore they cannot really trade or compete with other enterprises, but when they participate in cluster, there's an aspect of development of linkages for competitiveness, and thereby they are able to participate not only in intra-regional trade, but also extra-regional trade, and also in the global value chains. Within clusters, we find that SMEs overcome isolation and reach collective efficiency. This collective efficiency is an advantage that the cluster obtains. How do they get this collective efficiency? This is through the joint actions among the farms, and also the joint actions between farms, and also their support institutions. I had talked about the support institutions being the government, the various ministries, and the development financial institutions, the banks, academia, research, etc. So by engaging in these joint actions and having a collective approach and reaping the benefits of the collective efficiency, we find that SMEs, they are able to achieve results that are out of reach for individual enterprises. A good example we saw is, for example, in the project in Ghana, the SMEs, they were able to participate in this cluster, and they were able to buy a solar drying machine, which was very expensive and could not be bought by a single enterprise. So yeah, by engaging in these joint actions, they're able to achieve results that one individual enterprise would not be able to. Collective efficiency in clusters. So this are some of the advantages that I was talking about. Clusters provide solutions to the major and most common SMEs limitations. We know that SMEs face quite a myriad of challenges, but once they engage in clusters, then they are able to access technology, they're able to manage themselves better because they come with different ideas, and they're also able to comply with various standards, access to markets, access to finance. We've had this in very many sessions and conferences. You know, access to finance is a really big issue for the SMEs. So when they engage in clusters, it's easier for them to access funding, for example, from the DFIs in Africa and across the globe. They can also gain new skills. They're able to market and brand their products much better. So our approach to supporting clusters is actually split into these 3 levels. We work at the macro level, where it's all about, you know, strengthening the enabling environment, including the development of a dedicated policy strategy at national or at sectoral level. Then we work at the meso level, where we build the capacity of government institutions and business support organizations, the business councils for the particular REC or the chambers of commerce, universities and technical centers, and also banks. And finally, at the micro level, this is where we engage with the SMEs themselves, supporting collective action plan development and cluster initiatives, because you know, for the SMEs to know how to really reap the benefits of engaging in that cluster, they have to develop an action plan. And this is the level where that takes place. We have 4 principles for cluster development. The first one is focusing on existing clusters rather than creating new ones. The second one is promoting private sector-based inclusive growth. The third one is encouraging collective efficiency through the joint actions. I'd already mentioned about the collective efficiencies that the SMEs are able to get because of this collaborative ecosystem and engaging in the joint actions. And the fourth one is on strengthening a cluster governance mechanism. We have this publication, it's called Inclusive and Sustainable Cluster Development, the approach from UNIDO. We have a few copies we will share later on, and you can also access the publication online. This is a picture of the cluster conference that was recently held in Ghana in June 2024, where we invite the clusters from that country and also clusters from different countries to come and share their experiences and knowledge sharing. And we also invite other technical partners and also different regional economic communities, and and the African Union Commission also participated in the last one. The Ghana experience that I had alluded to. So this project, it's from the West African Competitiveness Program, which is called WACOMP. It's an EU-funded project. And the aim of this project is to improve the competitiveness of Ghanaian exports with a focus on 3 selected value chains. So we have cassava, we have fruits being mango and pineapple, and cosmetics. In terms of cosmetics, we're looking at the shea value chain. And we employ an integrated approach, which we call the 5 C's for competitiveness. The first C is coordinating, where We promote dialogue and synergies within the different value chains. I've talked about the 3 value chains up there. And the second C is competing, where we strengthen the SMEs' competitiveness through clusters and networks. The third one is conforming, supporting QI, quality infrastructure, and SMEs to comply with market requirements. My colleague Juan Pablo had mentioned about the different market requirements that enterprises are faced with, so that they can be able to trade and export abroad. The fourth one is connecting, and the fifth one is credit, where we link SMEs to the financial institutions to access appropriate and affordable credit. So just a few results of the cluster approach implementation in Ghana. We saw that new products were developed, and there was consistency achieved to better penetrate the markets. The shea blends, handmade soaps were produced, and shea products with essential oils. So we can see there was some value addition that was happening there. And dried mangoes through the solar dryer facility in Dodowa. This is the one that I had mentioned earlier on. And not only were new products developed, we also saw there was increased productivity from 20 to 45 tons hectare of cassava production at farm level. Therefore, we had local suppliers being able to enhance the quality of the cassava flour, the production in the Cape Coast. We also saw an increase in terms of production from 32 tons per annum to 73 tons for the shea butter value chains. We also saw that there was a reduced processing time. This is for the cassava value chain from 5 days, in terms of the cassava peeling and processing, from 5 days to approximately 8 hours in the Volta cluster, just out of participating in this particular cluster. And there was also increased mango productivity due to reduced incidence of the black spot disease. Then, talking about market penetration, I had mentioned the AFCFTA. We saw that more than 235 products were rebranded, 48% being fruits, 52% being cosmetics. And one really exciting outcome that we saw is the exports of new and existing products to the European Union market, to the UK, USA, Canada, etc., therefore making the African Continental Free Trade Area a reality. And also 65 producers were linked to international markets through GEPA, that is the Ghana Export Promotion Authority Market Hub. So this is just a few highlights. It's not all the project outcomes, but what we wanted to bring to your attention. So in a nutshell, from this project, in terms of impact, we see that over 40,000 MSMEs, they were directly impacted by the project. Moving on to skills, over 40,000 entrepreneurs were able to gain skills. Jobs were created, over 20,000 people were employed by the supported MSMEs. And the approach that we use, it has carefully integrated agenda perspective. So we also do not want to leave anyone behind. So we can see that, there was a considerable number of women-led SMEs that benefited from these projects. Just to quickly brush through, so some lessons learned, we can see that SMEs clusters, they enable the establishment of these collective structures for formulating and implementing joint strategies. Otherwise,
We need to be concluding.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. Through the provision of technical support to SMEs aggregated in the clusters, they are able to procure equipment that a single enterprise would not have been able to. They're able to, upgrade their products to meet quality and certifications that is needed for market access, and also financing and capacity building. As I conclude, the next step, we would be looking into exploring the possibility to replicate the Wacom Ghana experience and achievements in the SADC region. And UNIDO's expertise will support SADC member states in cluster development interventions through an upcoming initiative that we are designing. It's called the Africa Trade Competitiveness and Market Access Program, TCMAP, which is in line with the SADC Regional Indicative Strategic Development Plan, RISDP 2020-2030, and the SADC Industrialization Strategy and Roadmap. And also we have a continental initiative. We are in discussions with the African Union Commission to develop this continental initiative on clusters and enterprise modernization and upgrading. The African Union Commission approached us and they said that they would like to see such an initiative not only at regional level, but also to have it at continental level. Yes, and that is my final slide. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you to all the colleagues that made the presentation. Now it's to an exciting part. I'm going to ask my colleague, Vola. Vola is the UNIDO representative in Madagascar. She will just say a few words, and after that, I think we'll get into, if I'm sure the audience has got some burning questions or contributions. So Vola, over to you before we get into
Thank you, Matilda, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. First time also to be here in Harare, Zimbabwe. I would like to just wrap up for 2 minutes what have been said by my previous colleagues and see it from the perspectives of the field where the actions is taking place. So for our offices in the country, and namely in SADC country, I'm talking here for the case of Madagascar, there are 2 points I would like to mention, which are keys to make all of this happen on the ground with tangible results. The first thing is the coordination and synergy, which goes with ownership. Ownership from the government, ownership from the private sector and all relevant actors, but also ownership from the population themselves, for which the actions and interventions are made. And then in transition with this, the skills development. We can do all we want, we can invest in whatever we want, but if the population, and namely the youth, are not participating through those skills, should they be offered or are they demand-driven, then it will not be sustainable, not be inclusive, and most of all, we will not get the results we are looking for. So that is just my perspective from the field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vola. Now to the exciting part. I'm sure the audience has some, maybe contributions that they want to make. So the floor is open. I think when you take the floor, just introduce yourself, and if it's a question or contribution, please feel free. I can see a hand already at the back there. We start with women. So I think I just, take this at the back. I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mpoma Sopa. I work at the SACU Secretariat. And thank you very much for the informative presentations. I just have, I don't know whether it's a question or a plea because on the issue of clusters, I see there's a lot of work that you're going to do with SADC or on the SADC industrialization strategy. And I just wanted to check if the doors are still open for other applications, because within SACU we have some work that we're doing on industrialization, especially zooming in on SME clusters with the priority sectors that we have identified. So I just wanted to know if there is still a door open where we can make some requests. Thank you so much.
So I think, I hope colleagues you're taking questions, those that are directed to you. So there was a hand, I think here, in front.
Thank you very much, Madam. I'm Gerald Majoni from the Embassy of Rwanda. Please allow me to make a build-up for this case so that maybe it's clear to everyone. We have seen even in the Americas with the previous president, Barack Obama, and even consulting groups like McKinsey, highlighting concerns maybe around digitalization, an issue our esteemed presenter presented on. Early in the morning, we saw a signing of an arrangement between ARIPO and SADC around intellectual property. We see right now that there are serious concerns around copyright, around artificial intelligence. Some of the issues have been raised up by big companies with serious funding, likes of Warner Bros, Sony, among others. We've seen also the paid content model going under attack in terms of in the media space. Also, an interesting economic principle will say that if one standard becomes obsolete, another would come. Back then, we used to have telephones which had long cables, but we don't see them anymore. Even in the news players sector, we see that the Center of Investigative Reporting was actually even complaining that, okay, people just get access to news, no longer through the old ways of getting news. Moving on, I'm not a lawyer, but we can see that we have had legal cases versus OpenAI, Microsoft, Anthropic, NVIDIA, and more. And we are seeing new levels of settlements that are coming out because this is an uncharted territory. The UN, for example, only got to talk about AI only, if I'm not mistaken, last year. And well, Rwanda, which I'm representing, has an AI policy, which is quite a step in the right direction. We see settlements around fair use agreements, which are now coming up, which have never been seen before. As I rightfully said, where money is involved, things really get complicated, really complicated. At a societal level, we celebrate every year Kiswahili Day, but and we talk of Ubuntu. But look at it this way: do we even have a corpus of African language which actually even serves for maybe these large language models we are seeing? But we only see English, German, French, among other things. So then, what does this mean for everyone who is attending this conference? I thought coming here, I'm going to see such issues like that being talked about. But then I see the strategy which was presented in South Africa last year really isn't talking about this, which is quite interesting to me. Why is it interesting to me? We see that employment is going down. We see that at a foreign policy level, there are concerns among youth unemployment and women unemployment. This is causing instability in the region, which are very serious issues. So my question would be, should Africa be last? That's one. And also access to quality education material. We can see from the likes of Sergio Mane that talent knows no physical boundary. He was from a rural space. There are issues which we already see, like maybe copywriting of textbooks, which is quite a common issue everywhere. But then now, how can we make accessible and quality education available even to someone who's in the rural areas so that they don't learn maybe stuff like the structure of a locust, head, abdomen, thorax? Man, what's that? So look at even, you're talking about industrial development. People in the European countries, they now have things like digital twins, whereby a company can be even set up as a simulation. Tests are made before the actual production. Imagine what type of risk you can cut through the value chain. But where are these things? That's my question. Thank you.
Very, very complicated questions, but we'll endeavor, my colleagues will answer. The lady at the back there.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I also thank you for the presentations from the various speakers. I also wanted to find out from UNIDO what interventions you're making regarding policy and regulations with digital transformation and AI and other emerging technologies, because the experience with our governments, I don't know about other governments, but certainly my government, is that the practitioners in office, they are way behind the industry, the emerging technologies, and even the entrepreneurs. So there is no, you're not talking at the same level when you speak to them, and therefore they are not creating the enabling environment for us to speak to each other, for us to even form clusters with bigger players. It means that as entrepreneurs, we are being stepped on. We are not being recognized. We're not being given space. So as UNIDO, what interventions do you have that can help us in that area?
Okay. Thank you. I don't know if we should maybe let colleagues answer and then move on to the second round. Otherwise, there's going to be many questions. So who would like to take on the questions? I think there was a question to do with, I think, digitalization, AI, and then there was something on cluster. If the room is still open, for requests. Well, again, we've heard about, digitalization and the AI space. I think there was also something, by implication, the quality of education, so skills development. So perhaps Catherine on the cluster.
Yes, thank you very much, Matilda. Yes, thank you, my sister from, you said the organization, yes, SACO on that question. The simple answer I would say is yes, the doors are still open. We are very much looking into expanding the portfolio on cluster development, especially in the Southern African member states. So as I had mentioned before, the project that we want, or we are in the process of designing and developing for the SADC member states, it's still at a very initial stage. So when we get to this, to the level where we have to do the stakeholder analysis, identifying different partners that you're going to work with, yeah, we can definitely reach out to you. I can see you after this session if you have time, and yeah, we can exchange. So yes, we are definitely open. Thank you.
Yes, I don't know where to begin, but let me first of all say, you asked, like, should Africa be last? No, of course not. This is the clear answer, because, I mean, this is why we are here. This is why we say, okay, we have to create alliances, we have to create knowledge, we have to make sure that the tools are available to bridge this gap. This is the main goal. You mentioned, for example, the intellectual properties of AI and all that. This is a very big problem. This is a problem we're referring here, for example, to ChatGPT or all these large language models that you have. They go and pick up information from all over the net and they put it there. Okay, forget about intellectual rights. It has always been the case, not only in Africa, but in the whole world, that first of all you have the technology and then the regulations come. But it's always this big gap that you have to go through the problems and realize, okay, what are the dangers, what are all these things, and then slowly, slowly the standards come to fill and to kind of really filter, the dangers and remove the risk from the disuse. Again, one of the initiatives that UNIDO is working with now, there is something done by the Austrian government called Digital Humanism Initiative. So basically it's not only about AI, but it's all about all these digital technologies, and the idea is that you need to make the human element at the center of it. As I mentioned, they already have this kind of thing going on, so we look at all these technologies, about how inclusive they are, about how they really address the human problems. They don't really try to replace humans. They don't, the values, the values that are related to, again, for this initiative, related to democracy or rule of law, all of that, it always has to be included. So the artificial intelligence should not be biased in a certain way. So there is a lot of movement initiatives, that see this danger, and in UNIDO we try to align with it, and to keep it always within our VCA, because when we go and implement a project, we need to know that, again, the human is at the center of it, and the damage that can be done can be mitigated, and as every technology, yes, there is always winners and losers, when you have a new technology. I mean, as you mentioned, you have the line telephone, then the mobile came, and then you have, they have even problems with the universities, because now they don't know who's preparing a real PhD desertification or not, so this is always, so they try to find it through some AI programs to detect, but there are new AI programs that basically make it look like a human one, so there is a cat and mouse game that will continue happening now, because this is, and as you mentioned, also the Secretary General of the UN mentioned, like, this new AI is something similar. You need to have some safeguards, because it's similar to nuclear power. It has a great potential, and at the same time you can use it in a very good way, but it has also a big danger. You can fake many things, you can create fake news and all that. So this is a danger. It's not only for the industry, but it's for the whole aspects of life in every thing. Digital twins, certain technologies, I just want to give you an example. Yes, in Europe and in very big companies, they have all these very expensive technologies that they use. But I can tell you, I mean, I was recently in this international Swiss smart factory, where it's a smart factory that allows, basically, it's open for students and for like for newcomers, to go and test basically their concepts, and develop it into a product or into a service. And we saw like number of technologies, and they were showing me, like, look, this is because it's Switzerland, they have developed some kind of robot and some kind of small machines. It looks fantastic, that basically, like, it's a working station that can put different mechanics, small precision engineering, like small elements into the watch, and goes on. And I'm talking to one of the guys, and he says, that's a very nice one. I said, but don't use it. He said, no, it's expensive. So really, like, there are very few companies, I mean, even in Germany, even in the very advanced countries in Europe, very few companies who have this full integration of all these technologies. When we talk about digital transformation, we want to say here that, okay, we're looking at the technologies that are not the most expensive one. We're talking about something that is, first of all, there is the feasibility study. You need to make sure that when we choose a certain technology, it's going to enhance the productivity of the enterprise, but not break the budget. We need to get to a break-even point where basically your investment brings its benefits, as soon as possible, and not, you go and you put, I don't know, 100,000, for something that can be done by people, or to replace people and start creating unemployment. So all these elements are integrated within the strategy and the vision of UNIDO. I mean, this is more or less what I hope I answered.
Connected to that, there was a question from
Yes.
the lady there.
On the investment interventions on policy and regulations. I mean, in general, the same applies, basically. The same principle applies, Whenever you want to develop any kind of policy, you have to see basically, that's what I said, in the beginning. You have to make this ecosystem mapping to see, like, who are the different people? What is the markets? Who are the people who are going to be benefiting from this and who's not, The idea is, you want to, again, looking at the social element, environmental element, and the economic element. Without the three going together hand in hand, no strategy will make any sense. So what are we doing for these things? For example, I can give you an example in Tunisia, Cote d'Ivoire, the project that we're working in. We prepared basically like a number of strategic recommendations for the country on how to approach artificial intelligence, what type of coordination and cooperation has to be. We upgraded different institutions, specifically for the ministries, because the ministries, we offer them also like a lot of training sessions on what is Industry 4.0, how to help enterprises, access to it, what type of investments are needed, what type of changes in the regulatory framework you need to do, basically, to host better, to be more inclusive as well. So all this, it's part, and the regulator, and usually along the implementation of the project, you get a lot of new input that had feedback. It's like a cycle. You're always feeding back, going back, saying that, okay, going through this process of upgrading enterprises or these institutions, you need to change this kind of regulation. So it's a continuous thing that happens along the project cycle. Hopefully makes sense.
I'm sure there could be opportunity for further discussion. Yeah. Pablo, you wanted to say something?
Yes, just to make reference to the comment on digital education and how can we make best use of that for rural applications. It's, digital, we hear that you can go anywhere in the world. Yes, you can, but that place needs to have electricity to charge your devices. It needs to have internet access. Otherwise, you're completely disconnected. So if we're talking about education and quality education for those areas that do not have these basic services, it will be very complicated. Secondly, if you have these services of electricity and internet, you need to see also what is the IT literacy of your target group. I mean, it's easy to handle a mobile phone, a smartphone, but if you're going to take a course in a smartphone, it's not the same thing as just sending a message or receiving a message or browsing social media. So in order to use technology into education, we need to look at different factors of the target group itself and the conditions of that target group. Another important aspect that we see in technical education is the entry level. We talk about technical and vocational training, which is from 16 to maybe 21 years of people who don't go directly who don't go to university. But sometimes the level we need to make a catch up so they have the basic elements in order to absorb better the skills that are going to be taught. And this is something that sometimes we see the difficulties that we provide the support to the institution on the infrastructure, on the IT system of that institution. And when the students come, we need to do a refresher on basic areas in order to them to really take advantage of those new skills. I'm not sure if the question was on that side, but I think that's very important to say. So it's not the thing that, yes, with digitalization we can go anywhere. And many factors that we need to take into account. On entrepreneurship, I think was the last comment, what are we doing in entrepreneurship? I didn't have the time to look at the entrepreneurship value chain, but this is also the approach that we have. If one of the links of that entrepreneurship value chain is not working, the whole value chain may not work. In Comoros, we have one project funded by the EU that will look at the institutional capacity of incubators, ideators, also access to finance, business organizations that provide support to develop business plans, and how can we make sure that entrepreneurs make use of all these services. So we have a value chain approach on entrepreneurship as well. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. We continue the discussion. So we can have a second round of questions. Can we begin here? I think the hand was up earlier.
Good evening. And I also wanted to congratulate UNIDO. I think your visibility is really going up. What more with this project, you call it the competitiveness and market access project. I believe this can be a game changer, especially for SMEs. But my intervention came after my sister from SACU asked a question about them being involved. It struck me because if they are not going to be involved as SACU and all their member states are involved, there's a mismatch there. So basically what is important is coordination, because most SADC members, some SADC member states, in fact the majority of SACU, or all, if I'm not mistaken, are SADC member states. So what's critical is maybe when this project is being designed, there should be the scoping, if there are scoping missions, whatever, they should involve member states of SACU. In fact, in a way, SACU then becomes involved, unless if she's asking about signature, which I'm not worried about. The signature may be signed by SADC, but the beneficiaries are member states of SADC, and as an extension, SACU. So I think what is critical here is coordination and involvement, consultation with the member states. And member states have got allocations also from the EU on industrialization and cluster issues, but at country level. So it is also important to explore how this project can synergize and you have these economies of scale applying for the EU resources, which are channeled through national. These days they don't talk of national authorizing office. I don't know what. I mean, there are some an envelope that is allocated to each ACP state, and it is very important that maybe we collaborate and then make value out of the EU resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this point is very well taken. I think as we do the scoping for that program, we'll, like she said, we're going to consider SACU. We are going to take into account what you have said about, there are already, things that are happening, even with EU funding at national level. So synergies are very important. So the next question, please.
Thank you very much. My question goes to, I think it's Aneyu and this is Catherine, I think. So basically in this country, we have special economic zones. We've got EPZs and clusters per se. So my question is, because we currently have an SEZ for a mining company and an SEZ for a financial sector, which is Victoria Falls. So I think it's more of what works better. I understand that certain things you want to push, whether it's a product or an industrial park, but from their experience and what they've seen in the region and globally, what is the most beneficial way to cluster companies in one area, or to focus on exports, like I think it's you were saying, is to push a certain product out to bring in foreign currency, or is it a blend? I think for us locally, we have that murky way, and I think we would need some help from you guys.
Mine is not a complex question, it's a simple thing. How how can we access your presentations and even some of the contacts of people? Because there's some things we would want to follow up directly.
Voice is very strong, eh? You are hearing me. So anyway, please, the question from the gentleman.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. There is no formula when it comes to SEZs. For example, you see many countries, the Chinese experience is one of the successful model when it comes to SEZ success. But it has both the export version as well as also supplying to the domestic market. Some of the key success criteria, for example, in terms of moving forward with SEZs or industrial park is what do we want to achieve with SEZs? For example, if you want to achieve, if the objective is creating employment, for example, and if you have a competitive advantage in the textile sector, maybe a textile-focused industrial zone may benefit you most. But if you have competitive advantage in agribusiness sector, agro-industry, if you want to, the objective is to transform the agribusiness sector, to create strong linkage between the farmer and the processing company, value addition, and so on, then the approach will be agro-food park. So it all depends on what we want to achieve and what we can do the best with the resource we have. We have successful models of SEZs in China. Even within China, we have some failed models. If you go to other East Asian countries, there are successful experience. Again, if you come to African countries, we have success, then a failure also. So the most important thing is what we want to achieve and what we can do the best. So this is, yeah, please.
So just to follow up there, have you ever seen where you have special economic zone per commodity or per good? So if we're saying it's medicinal cannabis, we're not talking about a geographical place. We're saying it's a product, and that's the incentives that are going with the product, not giving a geographical place an advantage over another. Is that implemented globally?
For example, in one of our agro-food park approach, as I mentioned, one of the first things is to identify commodity, if commodity level is not possible, sector. For example, in Ethiopia, which UNIDO supported throughout the process, in one of the park, avocado is the identified sector from avocado oil. So the country has comparative advantage, or the region has comparative advantage on producing avocado. Yes, it's that kind of experience exists, and it's also a proper way of moving forward with industrial park. In some countries, for some sector, it may not work for some sector, especially, for example, if a country or a region has limited raw supply of certain product, then it's a challenge to supply this raw material to the processing companies. There is a shortage of raw material. So in this case, for example, this idea of CAPS, the Common Agro Park program of the African Union, came in this context. In terms of sourcing raw material from different countries, and the processing is in certain location. So there is certain commodities proposed for this, for example, rice, wheat, and so on. So yes, it's a proper way. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyway, and okay, so we have I think the last question. Is the mic?
Yeah.
How? Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry for coming late. Jan-Peter Böttcher, working for GIZ Botswana, SADC. Just wanted to find out, you spoke in the last presentation, thank you so much, that was very interesting, about cluster formation and the benefit for the upcoming EU program. Could you maybe further elaborate on that program, what you're planning to do? I mean, cluster formation would be maybe one piece of the other presentations we have seen today. Is there more to come, and what value chains would you be looking at together with SADC, if you already have anything planned? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. So maybe to further elaborate on the program, the Africa Trade Competitiveness and Market Access Program, the aim of this program is to contribute to sustainable intra-African trade, but not only intra-African trade, but also Africa and EU trade. And the program is split, it's divided into 5 outputs. There's an output that's focusing on addressing market access barriers. Another output is focusing on strengthening quality compliance and standards. Another one is focusing on value chain, revision mechanism. And the fourth one is focusing on enhancing value addition and diversification. And the fifth one is focusing on SME competitiveness and business support. So, well, it's still at, the very initial stages. So we have not yet gotten to the stage of identifying the value chains that are going to be under the SADC component of this program. So maybe we can, get in touch with you later on, and give you further details. But for now, it's still at the very developmental stage. So yeah, we don't know the value chains that are going to be selected for this program. But looking at, I was looking at the SADC industrialization strategy today, and I saw that, they have some value chains that have been identified. I think there's agroprocessing, there's minerals, there's pharmaceuticals, there's consumer goods. So, selection of the value chains, it really depends with the priorities of the region and the priorities of the member states. So it's what the member states would want to be focused on. So specific value chains for this initiative, I don't have that information. Nobody has it, and yeah, that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Just to add that, so this is a broader program. So it's with SADC, it's with ECOWAS, it's with COMESA, and it will be with ECAS. So all funded by EU. And as she said, the selection of value chains really depends on the region's priority. But we can give you a bit more information, like she says, afterwards. So thank you very much. Is there an additional question, last burning thing? No. Okay, with that, then I should say thank you very much. You've been very patient with us. You've sat, throughout the presentations. I hope that you had good, let's say, insights about what UNIDO is about and what we're doing. Please feel free to get in touch with us. I think we are getting your contacts. We are going to share the presentations that have been made. So on behalf of my colleagues, the presenters, on behalf of the Deputy Director General that had to leave because she had a meeting with the Minister of Finance, with a colleague of mine. Many thanks to my colleagues Bashir and How that have really worked hard to coordinate this meeting. So thank you very much. and wish you a very good evening and the rest of the week. Thank you very much. We forgot to thank our able team, the technical team that has made it possible. Thank you very much. Yeah.